Ever been told that HMOs are the best way to maximize rental income? More rooms means more rent, so it sounds perfect, right? But here's the truth, I don't recommend HMOs to beginners, and I'll tell you exactly why I don't. In this video, I'll break down the real challenges of HMO investing that most beginners tend to totally overlook, from red tape to tenant drama. I'll give you a simpler, smarter alternative that's much easier to manage for your first property. So let's start with why HMOs are so appealing in the first place, because on the surface, they do seem like a great strategy. HMOs, or houses of multiple occupation, look amazing on paper for several reasons. First being that you have more tenants, that means more rent. The second is that they tend to have higher yields compared to single lets. And the third is that you can turn large 3-bed houses into 5+ bed properties. So it's no surprise that beginners do get drawn in easily to this strategy. But many courses skim over the sheer graft and risk involved, especially when it's your very first property. There are easier ways to build a portfolio without diving into the deep end straight away. So what's the catch of HMOs? Well, here's what a lot of beginners don't see until it's too late. The first are licensing and regulations. Many councils require a specific HMO license for properties, and it's not just a form you fill in. Fire doors, interlinked smoke alarms, proper escape routes, minimum room sizes, the list just goes on. And if you miss something off that list, fines can run into the thousands of pounds, and in some cases they're unlimited. You could even face criminal prosecution if you let out an unlicensed HMO where a license is required. The second is planning challenges. Even outside of Article 4 areas, which are areas that are restricted against HMOs, councils can be strict and neighbours often reject. It's not just a case of adding more rooms to a property, you need to go through the proper channels, and that takes time. The third thing beginners tend to miss is that it is a much tougher management on day to day. With multiple tenants sharing spaces, conflict is super common, and you're often the one who has to sort it out as the landlord. Many letting agents don't manage HMOs for this very reason, and those who do, they usually charge higher fees due to that hassle. Number 4 is voids, bills, and profit erosion. Your rooms won't always be full, despite a listing saying they will be, and unlike a single let, the risk spreads across multiple voids. Additionally, most HMOs include bills in the rent too, so you have to cover gas, electric, broadband, and those costs are only going up right now. And to be honest, most tenants, especially for providing their heating bill for them, they don't tend to be conservative on the thermostat. And the fifth and final thing that beginners tend to miss from HMO investment is the reality from the community. There are loads of UK landlord forums where HMOs constantly discuss their struggles, their maintenance, the tenant disputes, the unexpected costs. I'm not speaking from theory here. I've helped plan and renovate HMOs in the past. I'm actually working on a potential conversion right now. One investor in Derby that I've worked with, who's now a good friend of mine, bought a house intending to convert it to an HMO. He added en-suites, new wiring, fireproofing, the works. But after all that work, which ran to around 100k, he pulled the plug and rented it as a single let instead. The local market just wasn't quite right, and he realized constant room letting just didn't fit his lifestyle at that time. But his final nail in the coffin was that HMOs are valued as commercial properties. And so in the end, his value was actually lower than the same house on a standard single let, because commercial valuations don't care about how nice the street is, just the numbers behind it. So it's a nasty surprise if you've converted to an HMO and you're planning to refinance. But ultimately for me, as someone who works full time, I just don't have the hours to take on the management and faff of a lot of HMOs, even if the cash flow looks better on paper. Personally, I prefer the majority of my portfolio to be single lets where you have one household and it's straightforward management and much lighter regulation. It is what I recommend beginners to start with and build experience. And this is through a BRRR plan: buy, refurbish, rent, and refinance, where you recycle your cash and grow steadily. And this strategy tends to be much easier to finance because mainstream buy-to-let lenders love them. They are easier to run because you have fewer moving parts, which means happier evenings for you, not being called out last minute. And it's much easier alongside a full-time day job where you keep your sanity and your weekends. You still build equity and cash flow, albeit not as good cash flow, but without the regulatory minefield and potentially bankruptcy-inducing fines that HMOs can bring. And I'm not going to be a hypocrite here. I do find HMOs a good viable option if they're done right, but I advise caution, especially if you're new to property investing. So are HMOs ever worth doing? Well, let's be clear. They can work if you've got the time, you've built the right team, and you understand the regulations and planning rules. But for most beginners, they're often more trouble than they're worth. So my advice is start simple, learn the ropes, build confidence, and then once you've got some experience under your belt, you can look at more complex housing options like HMOs. So if this video has helped you rethink your own strategy, check out my video over here on the best way for beginners to buy an investment property. It's where I walk through how you can get started with less than £10,000 up front without the complexity of HMOs. If you found this video helpful, give it a like, please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.